Hey everyone, so welcome back to my channel where I talk about whatever I want, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This time around, while I'm making this video, I'm also going to be preparing dinner for my fiance because she should be home in like a few hours. So I'm making pasta with turkey meatballs, red sauce. Aside from me cooking dinner, I wanted to talk about the movies I had seen in 2022, and mostly just because I haven't had a chance to really make that type of video. So I should probably skip out. So aside from me cooking food this time around, I actually wanted to talk to you all about some of the movies I had seen. And to be honest, I don't think I saw that many movies in 2022. It's for kind of like a goal for this year in 2023 that I'm going to see more movies. Ooh. There's a lot of fried stuff right there. Ah! I'm fine. My list is a lot smaller, and some of my opinions about the movies might be a little bit on the controversial side, but for the most part, yeah, it was just something I wanted to do this time around, do something different. Also, I just realized midway through recording this video, I should mention that this list is only for feature-length movies. I don't really have shorts listed, mostly just because I don't know how I would constitute a short, mostly because then I would include YouTube videos as well as a whole. So the first movie that was on my list I had seen, and I had actually jotted down on my list, was Thor: Love and Thunder. This movie was a huge disappointment. I was pretty excited going to it, mostly just because I had been a huge fan of Ragnarok. I think they had done a great direction, and for a while I thought Taika could do no wrong for the MCU. Boy, was I wrong. From what I remember, the movie was just really boring. There was a lot of moments where I feel like some of the jokes just kept going on.
This is tradition. Alright, everybody just relax and go.
And I think I would have to rewatch it to kind of get an idea, which I don't want to have to rewatch that movie just because of how disappointed I was. I think my fiance had kind of summed it up in terms of how well they handled Jane Foster's character. I think, you know, hindsight's 2020, where her character would have made more sense if she was introduced in Thor Ragnarok. In terms of her having the cancer. By the way, this video is going to be spoiler alert, so oh well. But yeah, so after seeing this movie, there were a lot of times when I felt like Taika was kind of giving the middle finger to fans. And you know, it definitely doesn't help that in his interview with, I think, Wired, it was an interview with him and Tessa Thompson. And for the most part, they were kind of just shit the animators behind all the special effects. And you know, that's disappointing to hear that you're kind of like downplaying someone else's work.
Does that look real?
In that particular shot, no, actually.
Yeah, but just, again, the movie just wasn't really good. Overall, I would have given that movie a 4 out of 10. It was just really disappointing. Alright, so for the second movie I had written down on my list, I had seen Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. And wow, I actually enjoyed this movie, despite a lot of what the critics were saying as a kind of a bad foray into the MCU. Definitely would agree that in terms of tone, it doesn't really match the rest of the MCU. And it definitely also undermines WandaVision 2 as well, kind of in favor for this movie. But I went into this movie wanting to watch a Sam Raimi film, and for the most part, I feel like it delivered in terms of like having those Sam Raimi aspects, so to speak. A lot of the zoom-ins as well as the close-ups of the eyes, that type of stuff, I enjoyed it. I liked the comedic effect, and I thought it had a lot of personality as an MCU entry. Overall, I would say I would give that a solid 8 out of 10, and it was definitely one of my favorite movies from 2022. Let's see. The Batman. I remember watching it. I loved the tone. I loved how moody Robert Pattinson felt as his portrayal as Batman. And the movie was, for the most part, pretty good. Dark, gritty. Absolutely loved loved the Batmobile that was in it, that Corvette slash off-wheel vehicle. Chef's kiss. Also, the Riddler, the person that played Catwoman, all really great additions. And despite all the prosthetics on Colin Farrell, he nailed it as the Penguin. The only thing that that movie really had going against it was that it was really long. I'm not really familiar with like a lot of Matt Reeves directorial stuff, but just sometimes I just felt like you easily could have cut out like maybe 30 minutes of just shots that were holding for too long. Definitely enjoyed it, and it's definitely one of the movies I can talk to a lot about my kids at YCP about, because there's one student that really loves talking about it. The next movie I want to talk about that's on my list was Top Gun. And if you're noticing that it's mostly only comic book movies as well as big blockbusters, yeah, I know, I'm pretty bad. I watched Top Gun during its second release, and honestly, you know, even though this movie is totally made for like those nostalgic boomers, I actually thought the movie was really well done, and it was also like a really good sequel to a movie from the 80s that's only really referenced when they talk about the beach volleyball scene, as well as the theme Danger Zone. But for the most part though, even though it's cliched, it still felt like it still took itself serious enough where it was a good movie. So next up, after Top Gun Maverick, I saw Bullet Train, and that movie was definitely one of the interesting ones. First off, it had been a while since I had seen a movie with Aaron Taylor Johnson. It's the guy that's Quicksilver, right? That also was Elizabeth Olsen's husband in Godzilla. That's so weird. The movie, for the most part, I thought, aside from the action, I thought it was only okay. Watching it, I was always kind of confused and perplexed as to why there were so many white characters that were in Japan and why it didn't have more of an Asian cast. Hey everyone, so really quickly, I decided to re-record a portion of this video, specifically for this Bullet Train segment, mostly just because I felt like the information I was presenting was not correct. After editing that re-recording of my thoughts about Bullet Train, I realized that that portion became like a rant, so to speak. So I decided to take it out of this portion. In general though, I'm not a big fan of this movie, and if you guys are interested in watching that video, it should be going up 1 week after this video does get released. Yeah, I was not a fan of that movie. The next movie that's on my list was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. You know, for the first movie being bullied so incessantly by the internet, I am actually surprised by how well the first one turned out, and I'm actually surprised how well the second one turned out. I actually enjoyed it for the most part in terms of how they depicted Knuckles, how they depicted Sonic, as well as how they depicted Tails. The movie itself is actually really fun to watch. We actually, I think, watched it with a bunch of kids, so it felt fairly fitting to like be watching that, because you know that is the target demographic. That being said, the movie has kind of fallen into a weird pit hole where it doesn't know what to do with the rest of its cast. James Marsden's in it, who is like Sonic's gatekeeper slash like pseudo dad for him, and I have no idea like they literally had to shoehorn a plot line. He's the one that saved Sonic for like a ring or something, and then that ring is actually ended up giving to like the bridezilla from the first movie, which is such a weird movie plot line. But overall though, for a kids movie, I still think it's a pretty good movie to watch. Overall, it's definitely a movie I would definitely watch again in the background, because you know it's Sonic, and so that's something to keep in mind while I'm reviewing this. So the next movie I saw, I watched Turning Red with my fiance on Disney Plus when it was released. Hey everyone, so really quickly, I decided to re-record this portion, mostly because after reviewing the footage, I felt the way that I was articulating these specific points, they didn't come out as articulated as I would have liked. Pretty much, I did think the movie was okay. I did relate to a lot of the Asian American topics, including like the aunties as well as the overbearing parents. But for me, I could tell that this movie was aimed at a very specific demographic. Specifically, it's aimed for female females, and since I'm a male, I can't really say a lot in terms of that. But I did want to like respond to some of the criticisms that this movie did undergo when it was released. I know that this specific critic had made like a comment saying that the filmmaker of Turning Red had only made the film for their specific friend and family group, which I would heavily disagree that when it comes to like filmmakers and like understanding their brains, all filmmakers do that essentially. They all essentially are making films that their friends and family are going to want to watch and support. And for me, using that as a criticism for this movie, it seems like a really half-assed attempt at marginalizing Asian Americans. Alright, that's all I gotta say about that, and I'm gonna jump straight back into the video. Overall, I would probably give this movie like a 6 out of 10. The next movie I watched was Chippendales. I watched, man, it's so hard to focus while I'm chopping up garlic. Chippendale Rescue Rangers, the movie with Andy Samberg as well as the guy from Big Mouth. I forgot what his name was. And in all honesty, I thought the movie was kind of like okay. I think they had grossly miscast Andy Samberg to the point where people complaining that they couldn't listen to a movie with Charles Martinet as Mario have clearly never seen this movie. I couldn't listen to Andy Samberg's voice through a whole movie. At least this movie specifically. It was really hard and grating to hear something so cute and fluffy be coming from a guy from Lonely Island. Overall, though, I think the movie was okay. I think the premise where the animated tunes were being sent to chop shops or animation shops was, you know, I feel like it depicted those Asian animation studios very negatively, but I think it was such an interesting point. And plus, we also did get Ugly Sonic from the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, so I thought that was a really interesting nod that they would reference that. Would say the movie was just okay in terms of that. The next movie that was on my list was Lightyear. I saw Lightyear, I think, on Disney Plus, and I didn't like that movie one bit. The movie felt like it was trying its best to be a kid movie, but at times it felt like it was being too dark and serious and too depressing, really. Because essentially what it is that Lightyear is he's willing to like travel, I guess, 20 years into the future until like their fuel it becomes stable. But for some reason, like, it's just like it's just super depressing and sad seeing like Buzz essentially not getting older while everyone around him is essentially growing up and dying. Again, I don't really know who this was made for. Like, it definitely as kind of referencing the Turning Red critic that said that the director was making a movie just for her friends and family. It feels like this movie was trying to make a movie just about being a nihilist and just depressing as hell. I didn't have any problems with the LGBT relations that the movie did showcase with the Buzz's best friend. I think that was appropriate. It's kind of like down the chips in terms of like, you know, their survivability and stuff. It's just a depressing movie. That being said though, the toys were really cool. There was like a lot of criticism, like kind of buzzing about the movie, like maybe a month prior, that Tim Allen wasn't welcomed or wasn't even asked to audition for Buzz. In all honesty, I kind of agree that he should have at least been offered or even told about the position to play Buzz. Not necessarily the Chris Evans version that we see, but the one that's like from the far, far future. Studios didn't make any effort to include Tim Allen in it, especially it would have been perfect. Essentially, you're ushering in a new era of Buzz Lightyear. Yeah, I don't understand, like, you know, what their intention was, you know, with making Lightyear. It's weird. Overall, I didn't like the film. So my next on my list is Don't Worry, Darling. Don't Worry, Darling is a weird one because it was kind of portrayed to be like a deep psychological thriller similar to Get Out. And I would definitely agree that essentially it's a white woman's interpretation of Get Out. Pretty much it's about a girl that's in simulation, almost kind of like the Matrix, where she's living day to day as a housewife in like the 1950s. She, you know, begins to understand that the world that she's in is not real and it's just being manipulated by someone. The movie itself feels like it falls flat at times, and that's especially towards the end where the movie just kind of wraps up everything after it's built up so much. And there's so many things that get left resolved. For example, like what the hell are the earthquakes that we see in the movie? Like, what's the role of Gemma Chan's character at the end when she kills Chris Pine's character? It literally doesn't make any sense. Harry Styles is conflicted with this movie, in my opinion, too. Because there were times when I couldn't really see him as like a grimy type of fellow. He's pretty much an incel and keeping his Florence Pugh's character hostage. There's an instance where with his character, and this is my final straw. I know for a fact I cannot take Harry Styles seriously as an actor, mostly just because there's an instance where he's crying very loudly and supposed to be very sad. This is right after he calls like the secret place to take Florence away to be electrocuted, and it looked so freaking weird. It looked like he was laugh crying. I just couldn't take it seriously. And then to the point where I started busting out laughing because of how bad it was. And I know for a fact I made everyone in the movie theater uncomfortable. Overall, I would say it's a pretty disappointing movie. All right, so for the next movie I saw that's on my list, and this one is 100% the best movie I saw from 2022, Everything and Everywhere at Once, with Michelle Yeoh, Kiwi Kwan, and Stephanie Hugh. And honestly, this movie is just a great interpretation on the social relations between Asian American kids as well as with their foreign parents, not really understanding one another. And like, there's definitely a lot of moments that talk about, like, I can't say the word because it's YouTube, but there's definitely a lot of moments that Stephanie Hugh's character talks about living herself to the most extreme circumstances. And it's definitely a really interesting seeing that. So the 3D effects in this are really amazing too, especially since this was just, you can clearly tell it was a passion project because I think it was only like 3 or 4 animators in total. It was a really small amount, spent a lot of time just doing it individually and kind of perfecting it. Yeah, and this was also just such a great moment when you realize that Michelle Yeoh as well as Kiwi Kwan are kind of back in terms of that mainstream acting. And she was also in Shang-Chi, she was in Crazy Rich Asians, and she was even in Minions Rise of Gru. And honestly, it's a great renaissance for her to like. And Kiwi Kwan, this was a guy that didn't act and pretty much retired after his years as a child actor. And for me, I grew up with like Short Round, like watching him on on Temple of Doom and The Goonies, like when on VHS, and it's just so good to see that representation really matter, because this is literally a kid that I grew up watching. Now he's like a fully grown adult and he's making like a comeback. Great, very, very great. Again, best movie I've seen this year. Nothing else really compares. The next movie I've seen that's on my list right now is Clerks. I think Clerks was such an interesting movie just because I haven't seen the first two. I've only seen the spin-off with Jay and Silent Bob. And for me, it felt very poignant. I can kind of tell I was probably that target demographic. Maybe not age-wise, but for me as like a filmmaker that's kind of growing up, it's, you know, really depressing seeing people's dreams not come to fruition. And that's what this really movie is about. It's pretty much about the main character from the first Clerks movie kind of realizing that he's getting older and he's just so depressed and that nothing in his life and career has really been going towards what he wants. So when it finally comes to like his death, he's kind of like ready to embrace it. I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I know it didn't get that many good reviews, but I would very much recommend watching it, even if you haven't seen any of the Clerks movie. I would especially recommend watching it if you are a filmmaker, but maybe watch the first two just so you can kind of understand the references, because they do call back a lot to those movies. For the next movie that's on my list right now, I have a movie called Pinballs. It's kind of like this not very well known story about how pinball kind of came to be in the United States. And to be honest, this wasn't released theatrically fully because it's only in the film festival circuits. I only included this on this list because I actually did review this movie for Poppy Jasper, and then I think it got selected. It's a really good movie. I don't know if you guys will ever get a chance to see the movie, but I do recommend if it does ever hit like your local theaters for a limited run, I would recommend watching it. It's pretty good. So next on my list was I saw the movie Black Adam with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. The movie is fun, you know, a lot of action, a lot of, you know, fun, but the movie just, it feels like it's not gonna do anything big, and I don't take the movie seriously. Like, they were trying to do like the Black Panther pride thing with Wakanda Forever, and they tried doing something for Black Adam by saying Ted Adam, which I know this is what they do for Namor in Black Panther 2, but like, yeah, they tried doing the exact same thing in Black Adam. I would say dead right, it's just stupid. Definitely the saving grace from that movie, which surprised me as hell, Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate. I thought he did a tremendous portrayal of him, and it just felt so nuanced. As soon as I saw that character be mentioned that it was going to be in the movie, I knew for a fact he was going to get killed off. Like, no way in hell you get such a big name actor to play a character reoccurring. In regards to seeing Dr. Fate in other media portrayals, he always dies. Like, he always gets killed off because of how overpowered he is. Next movie I saw was Dragon Ball Z Super. The movie? I forgot what it's called. But this movie surprised me because we went to go see this when they were doing, I think, the $3 movie tickets. We're trying to go see Top Gun Maverick, but they were sold out, so we ended up settling on seeing Dragon Ball Super. In terms of an anime movie making sense and not watching all of Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball in general, it actually made quite a bit of sense. And in terms of like seeing all the different cool power-ups and stuff, it definitely was cool seeing Piccolo and Gohan, like, you know, kind of have a bigger role than what they currently have in the anime. And as someone who doesn't watch Dragon Ball Z enough, like, I only watch the clips with Beerus because I like Beerus a lot. It's a pretty good movie. So next up on my list, I saw One Piece Red. Definitely had not seen any type of One Piece media, and in terms of like how Dragon Ball made it easy for fans that were more casual to kind of ease into it, I definitely didn't get that at all for One Piece Red. It definitely feels like it just drops you in with this character. The way how I perceived Uta was, I thought of her more like Naruto. I don't know what character does it, but I thought what she does in the movie is a lot more similar to a Tsukiyomi, which is like an endless sleep. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it was just something I noticed that one distracted me quite a bit. But I mean, so despite all the criticisms I have for One Piece Red, because it's just definitely doesn't make it easy for newcomers, but it made us so interested in the world of One Piece that we did start watching it. Currently, I think we're on episode 438. Honestly, first watch, we weren't even aware of all the references they make to the regular series, so we didn't realize that Kobe and blonde hair guy, I forgot, were the same characters that we meet in like the first 10 episodes. That was such a nice surprise for us when saying, no way are these like the same characters and stuff. But overall though, One Piece Red, I think of the two, between that and Dragon Ball Super, this one, in terms of rewatchability, I think we are having a lot more fun. Because honestly, I just don't really care about watching Dragon Ball unless it involves Beerus, because I want a naked cat. So the next movie I saw last year in 2022 was Wakanda Forever. I think this movie just made me cry just because of how much we were going to be missing Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther. Definitely liked Namor's depiction as a Mayan god. I know a lot of people are upset that they wanted to see more of the Atlantean, but like the way how I perceive Atlanteans is that where his people live in, it's like Central America. I can really do believe that could also be a perceived depiction of Atlanteans, especially once you see stuff like Atlantis, the anime movie. Ironically, even though Namor does kill Queen Ramona, I'm still rooting for him just because of how awful the Wakandans are being ruthless, to the point where I just kind of understand why Namor would even he meets their brutality with his own brutality, which I don't mind that one bit. Definitely feel like they were trying to shoehorn that the Wakandans were still in the right. They definitely weren't. I felt like in terms of plot points, Wakanda Forever could have literally just been resolved if Shuri had just told him that if Namor was to kill Riri Williams, that would not stop the world government to try to build a device that detects vibranium. It literally would not, because it's literally been done in the MCU and Iron Man 2, where just because you have this unique set of technology that someone else will come a long way with something else that's similar, if not an exact copy of it. Like literally, like that could have resolved it, and then the Wakandans could have just offered them some sort of protection from the world government. Also, I will say this too about this movie. I did not like Everett Ross, mostly just because I felt when it came to that plot line, I understand why he would support them, of course, but it did feel like it was like an after story and it was directed by a second director just to help shoehorn and make everything connected together with the MCU. We definitely did see this movie more than once, just because of how much feels it is, as well as kind of to do more of a breakdown. The movie was really good, and it also just pays homage to Chadwick Boseman very well, so good movie. It's definitely a hard movie for me to rewatch again, but I definitely could do it. We're coming down to the last two movies that I saw, and they're both kind of mediocre. So we watched Disenchanted, which premiered on Disney Plus, which was it was pretty much a home to video type of situation where it's a sequel to the movie Enchanted, I believe. Felt it was very boring at times. And for me, I'm having a hard time remembering certain aspects of this movie to the point where I would say it was super boring. Also, I would definitely say in that movie, they definitely underdeveloped the daughter's agency, just because she goes from being like this rebellious youth to kind of just being forgotten, but then being asked to save the stepmom, which for me, they need to give her more screen time to like help really solve that and develop her character more. I did not like that movie because of how hard it is for me to talk about right now. So the last movie I saw for 2022, and I guess it's a little disappointing that I ended the year with this movie, was Spirited, which is, it's as the name would suggest, it's a Christmas movie. It's pretty much a modernized Christmas Carol. Will Ferrell plays a rehabilitated Ebenezer Scrooge, is trying to show to Ryan Reynolds' character, who is, as the movie describes, as irredeemable. And also on top of that, the movie sets it up where Ryan Reynolds' character pretty much is involved in the unliving of a little kid, and he feels immense guilt from that. And that being said, though, his character development shouldn't have had to like get to that point where he was such a scummy villain. This is just coming from like a movie making perspective, where it feels like they went in like such a weird nuclear option, I guess, so to speak. And I remember talking with my fiance about it. In terms of like what they did, it feels like it's like kind of like this weird Hollywood trope that, oh, in order to get better, you have to like prevent someone from unliving themselves, which is weird to think that that's acceptable in Hollywood filmmaking, because they're not the only ones that have been doing it before. I'm not a fan of how they depicted Ryan Reynolds' character having like a younger woman love interest, just because it seems like that's his reoccurring joke, because he did that a lot in Free Guy, where he would have like very young looking woman praise how hunky and handsome Ryan Reynolds is.
Ryan, you're a funny guy, but next time, make it a little less obvious that you helped write the script.
He's funny and he's sweet and he's so handsome, and
He's also a really cute guy. And not just the face, you know, but like the whole thing.
also he's like crazy hot.
They do that in this movie quite a bit too. But on the plus side, in doing so, they also did make Octavia Spencer, who is the love interest for Will Ferrell's character, which from a filmmaking perspective, that's not generally something that's pretty much, it's like her body type is not something that people usually fall in love with, so to speak. So instead, they really based it off the character. So I think that's a huge plus for what Spirited did do. I guess that viral YouTube video of Ryan Reynolds singing with Will Ferrell and then a cappella, for that video, they clearly filmed it during this movie because of what they're wearing. So that's it with my year of 2022 movie watching. Reading the numbers from my list, I was able to calculate that I saw about 19 movies in total. I am a little disappointed with myself just because those movies that I saw, most of them were mainstream movies with like big name actors. Only 5 of those movies were not mainstream. Yeah, I feel like for this year, for 2023, I definitely need to push myself to watch way more movies this year. For my 2023 movie list, I'm definitely going to include movies that are outside of 2023. Like if they were 2022 movies or if they were 1970 movies, I'm still going to talk about them because it'll be my first time still seeing it. I feel like when it comes to movies and filmmaking. It's super important for me because obviously I'm a filmmaker who's trying to like make his own creative content. It's definitely a great opportunity for me to keep learning. And yeah, I'm gonna keep watching more movies next year. Crap, I'm running out of storage. All right, if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to like it as well as subscribe to my channel. It definitely goes a long way. And feel free to tell me what was your favorite movie that you saw in 2022. Feel free to tell me if you guys disagree with my list as well as the criticisms from this year of movies that I've seen. And also feel free to tell me like what movies are you excited to see in 2023. And as always, I will see you guys for the next video. Bye. Let's make some garlic bread. Cool, I left everything out there.